I'm Bree Groff, and I'm about to have a fun and productive conversation with Mike Vardy.
Welcome to A Productive Conversation. I'm Mike Vardy. My guest today is Bree Groff, someone who spent their career guiding leaders at companies like Microsoft, Google, and Target through major organizational change. Bree is the former CEO of the Noble Collective, Nobl Collective, a senior advisor to SY Partners, and now the author of a book that I really genuinely couldn't put down or stop smiling at. It's called Today Was Fun, a book about work seriously. In our conversation, we get into how the concept of fun isn't frivolous, it's foundational. We talk about the role of novelty, permission, environment, and even socks in making work more human and meaningful. And we also unpack the costs of overworking, not just for us, but for the people who love and rely on us. This is a fun and, yes, productive conversation you won't want to miss, so let's get to it. Here is my conversation with Bree Groff. Enjoy. Bree, thank you so much for taking the time to be here today. I'm holding the book in my hands. Today was fun.
Yay.
I can actually fit this over my face, and it looks like I've got a smile. A book about work, seriously. It's just a fun way the book has been put together. And I know your cat agrees.
If I
It
could
is going to be a
tell
fun
her I'm
conversation
doing a
today.
podcast, I
Yeah.
could.
Try to tell a cat what to do. Really.
Yeah.
I had cats. So I had, when I actually moved out west, I had my two cats that came with me, and both of them lived to about 18, 19 years old. Like they lived for a
Wow.
long time. They were great. Getting them, one acted more like a dog than a cat, and he was the alpha. So it was really interesting because the other cat kind of fell in line. But as soon as he passed away, the other one's like, okay, I can be a cat now. And he would just like completely, it was rather fun to watch. You would occasionally catch him kind of falling back into the habits he'd learned from his former alpha, because he'd be like, wait, I'm a cat. And then he'd like take off. He'd get skittish and take off. Well, no, I got to regroup and be who I am. So yeah, I'm looking forward to this because, we don't often associate, work and fun
Right.
as much as we should. I mean, we spend so much of our time in work that if it's not fun, then it permeates throughout our entire lives, right?
Yes. I say all the time, if we are wishing away the work week, we are wishing away our lives. It's just a fact. If we're saying, I got to get to Friday, can this quarter be over? Those are the finite days of our lives, and we're going to run out. No two ways about it. And so I've become passionate about helping people look forward to the work week in the same way that they look forward to the weekend. It's a different way to spend our time, but there's nothing about work that's fundamentally painful. Work is just creating something of value for others that you get paid for, or unpaid work you don't get paid for, but you get appreciated for. There's nothing about that is fundamentally rough, laborious, painful. A lot of times, all of that pain around work is self-inflicted.
Right.
We're the ones who've made ourselves crazy with the meetings and approval processes and deciding that we need to wear ties and all those kinds of things. And so I'm trying to bring back the original fundamental concept of work, which is it is fun to create value. And if we can do more of that, we can enjoy our lives more.
One of the things that I thought about when I got the book was permission comes up, like the ability to feel like you can infuse fun. So I'll throw an example back from when I worked at Costco. So
Yeah.
that's what one of the big job I had. I mean, there was a few others along the way, including, which we touched on before we record, a bit of acting and performing and so on and so forth,
Yep.
which you've had some experience with as well. I remember when we would have coupons at Costco, right? You'd go into Costco, there'd be a big sale, and I was the service deli manager. So occasionally we would have chicken pot pies on sale or what have you. And one year we had to do what were called uh, salmon tips, and they were basically like almost like salmon locks, right? Smoked salmon tips, and it just the flywheel was just the same, and I was getting bored, and I mean, I'd gotten to the point where everything was on such autopilot that I'm like, "What am I even here for?" Like, I'm here to earn a bit. Like, I'm following, I'm doing
Yeah.
all the things. I wasn't slacking off. I was just going through the motions. And I realized that at some point, I'm sure everybody comes to this, where it's like, this going through the motions will eventually stop me going through any kind of motion, and I will just start to slack and things will fall through the cracks. I need to infuse some creativity in it. So I asked not just my warehouse manager, but I also asked the people at the head office, because they also ran this kind of stuff. I said, can I do something different with this? And they're like, well, what are you thinking? And in Costco, they have these seafood boxes that the meat department would use. They're big, giant blue bins. They're the size of pallets. You fill them with
Mhm.
ice, and they're movable. They basically are giant pallet-sized seafood storage areas, or displays. And I said, I want you to let me use those for this promotion, not just putting them in the coffin coolers. And I'm going to run some samples, not through the sampling group, but we'll just do it on our own. If you want to run it through the group, we can. We ended up doing that because they wanted to do that. And I said, we're going to put them right near the front door. So, when you walk into a Costco and there's like the TVs on the one side and there's the fence that
Sure.
has all that stuff. Well, they walked in, and you'd see me behind this display case that's portable, wearing my like whites and red apron and all that stuff. And I'm putting salmon tips together, and people were they first thing they would see, oh, let me try that. Oh my God. And they'd walk away with a thing. And first off, was really successful. I was a victim of my own success at that point, because we
Amazing.
did so well that they're like, you got to do this again. I'm like, oh, come on. So it
Now you're
became
the salmon tips
right.
guy. I know.
But the point is that it was different. There was novelty, but
Yeah.
I didn't deviate from my mission. And I think that required not just a stepping back, but asking permission. And it was an infusion of fun. And sometimes fun, to me, at least in that instance, some people are like, Mike, that sounds boring. Why was that fun? It's because it was different. So I wonder
Yeah.
if, like, the idea of doing something different and the asking of permission and the novelty of it, that all plays a role in this, right?
Oh, for sure. So, chapter 4 is called Make Brilliant Work. Don't let busyness and conformity sabotage you. And it's all about what you did there with the salmon tips in the store. The world actually rewards us as employees, as leaders, as organizations for being creative. People want to be, as we say, surprised and delighted. There's so much room for companies to express themselves in more interesting, human, engaging ways. And then we have to ask ourselves, well, why don't we do that at work so often? Why do we just go through the motions or try and make the work that sort of looks respectable? And a lot of times it's either out of boredom or out of fear, which gets to your permission point. So a lot of times we're thinking, how do I make my work look normal so that I look normal, so that I fit in and keep my job? And so that's why you see the strategy decks that look like 1,000 other strategy decks and don't say anything, or the marketing copy that looks like every other marketing. It's like every pharma commercial looks like every other pharma commercial.
Yep.
It's right, and because no one ever got fired over that,
Right.
and yet it's not compelling for the customer client, but it's also not fun for us. Like, we all, like, as humans, we also wanna play and be creative and run experiments and see what works, and so the irony is that that sort of playfulness that you exhibited with, like, "I wanna try this out," that wasn't at odds with good business, that actually drove the business,
Hmm.
and it was because, 1, well, you gave yourself permission to ask, at least, that someone over there was like, "Yeah, that's a great idea, Mike, let's go for it," and you had the bravery to try something that you didn't know would work or not. And
Right.
that's also part of the exhilaration, part of the fun. Like, if you always know that something's going to work, that's actually it's actually not fun, right? Like,
Hmm.
it's be comfortable and safe, but that sort of risk taking, that sort of like butterflies in your I don't know if you were nervous that first day, like,
Well,
but
yeah,
it might have been kind of exciting.
yeah, well, a few things that also revealed themselves too, because I think that's the other thing too, is that when you're paying attention to this sort of thing, and there's a quote in the book like "to see takes time," right? George O'Keefe, like
Yes, George O'Keefe.
right.
Mhm.
So to me, there was a few things I noticed. Number one, um, I felt exhilarated. To your point, like I was like, this is neat, this is different, this is new. But the team I was working with, we were my staff, and even the team that was the supervisors that had to give up space,
Mm,
they weren't too pleased. The deli staff members, not all of them were excited about this prospect because they're like, oh,
sure.
so we have to. It was a combination of things. Well, why can't we just do the things the way we've always done them? Others were, oh no, we're gonna sell more, and that means we're gonna have to make more, which of course that's a good thing, not a bad thing, right? But it was just because it was disruptive.
Sure.
I needed it to be disruptive for me to keep like kind of the fires burning, for lack of a better term.
Mhm.
And so when all of that happened, that was one thing I noticed. So by exploring fun, you get to see how others relate to it, I think, as well. And I wonder if we can speak to that, because in those instances, it can, if you're not careful, I would imagine, diminish the fun, right?
Yes, and so actually my master's is in learning and organizational change, and so a lot of my learnings about fun are also steeped in what does it mean to do something differently? What does
Right.
organizational change mean? And so, yeah, I mean, it definitely doesn't surprise me, and I can also understand their perspective, likely coming from a few places. So one is that within a culture of, "Oh, we don't do fun things," someone stepping out to do something kind of fun
Hmm.
feels nerve-wracking, sometimes threatening. You might even be worried for that person, like, "Oh, you're putting yourself out on the line." It's it's a departure from anytime you have a departure from the dominant culture, it sort of riles up some of these emotions. Um, I also, in the past, I've spoken a lot about change actually equals loss. That's why people resist it, not because
Right.
of whatever next iteration is coming, but because they're losing something in the process. So, is it the loss of time? Like, oh, now I'm going to have to spend so much more time preparing these salmon tips. Is it a loss of familiarity? Well, I don't know. How am I going to bring these things up? And is there going to be time? A loss of competence. Well, I don't know how to do it this way. Like, how am I supposed to set all these things up? And so, underneath a simple idea can actually be a lot of emotion of that kind of discomfort. What I found though is that when somebody does do something like what you did, like put yourself out there to have a little bit of fun, usually there's at least one other person who's like, that looked that looked cool. Like,
Hmm.
I've had this idea about brisket. And,
Yeah.
like, what if we did this with the brisket, it starts what I think is beautiful about it, it starts to open the door to other people engaging in that spirit of play, experimentation, and sometimes you do need to, like, wait a hot second for some of those initial emotions to calm down of, like, "Is this threatening? Is this costing me more time, energy?" But then once that subsides, there's a little bit of, "Can I play?"
Hmm.
Um, which is a beautiful thing in a culture.
One of the kind of the after action things that happened were, I think the meat department started to do more of those presentations at the front with just their regular stuff. They go, we have these things.
Mhm. Guys were on
Why
it.
aren't we using these more? And it was a combination of a few things. Number one was just the there was a difference. There was
Mm,
any kind of shift that is noticeable. And because of where we were at, um, there was excitement around it. Anytime that showed up, it breeds it, right? Now, I mean, again, to your point, like some people, it sends them running in the other direction because they don't really care to that point, and maybe they're not invested. And there's plenty of people who I know that work at jobs that are there, and they look at the means to an end, and that's fine. Problem is, if it's not fun for you, then the means is a problem. Like you can't, you're going to be droning through, which is one of the reasons why I ultimately left Costco. Is once ultimately it was no longer fun for me, I found something else that was fun and rewarding, and found a way to make money at it, which all those things had to line up. Creativity. I actually have this written down in my notebook about if I want to make my work last now, I need the freedom to be creative. I need it to be commercial. In other words, I need to have commerce involved, and I need community to be involved.
Mm.
Because it's not just the community in my mind, especially if we go back to the example I shared of the team I was working with, and not just the deli staff, but people in the warehouse, but also the people that saw the results of it that were not in the warehouse, the head office people and such. Because what they did, and I alluded to this earlier, is they're like, okay, so next time you're going to do it too. And I'm like, now it's not fun. Now it's an obligation.
You ruined it.
And well, it's like anything else. I mean, obviously, as someone who's studied business, it's like if you beat your budget, if you beat sales,
No,
that's
I
the new
know.
benchmark, right? So I'm like, but
Never beat your
the
budget.
right, but that's the so to that point, I was like, they're like, oh well, that's the sales you got last time. I'm like, yeah, well, I did that last time. We'll do it again. I'm like, yeah, but it was exciting last time. It's not going to be as exciting now. I said,
Yeah.
so we need to not do that. Well, yeah, but we'll lose sales. I'm like, but you're forgetting that we gained this, and so getting caught up in the minutia, I think, is another thing that can really kind of um have a detrimental effect on fun. Like getting caught up in that. Can we touch on that a little bit as well? Like
Yeah.
you touched on like the stretchy pants dress code kind of like I mean, I could be wearing pajama pants right now, and we're still having,
I hope you are.
no, I had a live virtual retreat today where I had my wide camera on. I had to keep
I
that in
see.
mind. But yes,
Got it.
sometimes it is pajama pant day. But nonetheless, like, can we talk about, the minutia and maybe the rules or the things that we need to follow, which can kind of stifle fun?
Yes. Um, so on the one hand, on your like, let's do it again. You found that boring example.
Hmm.
No, I think actually the beauty of that example before we get to stretchy pants is
Hmm.
some people actually find the optimization fun. They
Yeah.
just needed a different person in there, right?
Yep.
And you are a kind of person who finds experimentation and novelty and play fun. And, it's like it takes all kinds for the world to go around, right? And
Hmm.
so in organizations, it's just a matter of knowing like who's going to find it fun to perfect that salmon tip display. And it's not you. And so don't put you in that role. Send you off to start to, figure out something else.
Well, truth be told, we did it, and I just assigned it to one of the team members.
Yeah,
That was their baby, and so
you solved
here,
it.
yeah, I solved it because there was no getting out of it. I was my
When
job
in
was
doubt,
to
delegate.
my job was now at that point. My job was, to your point, to optimize something differently, which was how do I make sure that I don't waste too much, because you have to make a certain amount, and if we didn't sell as many, all of a sudden I've got all this waste. How do I deal with that?
Sure.
So that was the problem I had to solve next. That was a problem nobody else could solve. So I'm like, well, I can't, I know I'm not going to do this as well as I did last time, but this person really liked it. They were excited. They're really good with customers because the people, if you've ever been to a Costco, the meat department and deli department are behind the glass for a reason.
Oh, no.
We can be a bit, people back there, they're used to just, they're butchering things. I'm not going to say they don't all have good customer service, but there is a reason sometimes, and they can, but there's one person in particular who's really good with customers, had that, like, here, do you want to take this? Oh yeah. Like, cause it was novelty for them. It was fun.
Yeah. It's
This
so
is
cool
out of
for
the
them.
usual routine. So that was the change I had to make. But yes, so I had to solve that problem. But to your point, yeah, like there are people who, whether there's the implementers, there's the visionaries. Like I have, even in my business now, I'll make something for my own business, and that part is really exciting to me. And then it's like, oh, it's time to edit it and audit it and refine it. I'm like, ugh, you do that. I'm
Uh-huh.
going to make the next thing. Like we already have the core elements. I'll make the next thing. Sarah, you go fine tune that and make it better. So that awareness, I think, is really important, though.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. There's different people will find joy in different places. Um, you brought up the other like joy killers, the minutia, the things. Yeah, there's a lot in the book about stretchy pants that I talk
Mm.
about. So all of this is really about debunking the notion of professionalism and specifically performative professionalism as opposed to functional professionalism. So, functional professionalism, I would define as doing high quality work on time with respect. That's it. There is nothing about having a zipper on your pants or, wearing a pressed top that contributes to that functional professionalism. The performative professionalism, sort of like making the very fancy presentations and being like super well groomed with a nice suit and all of that, speaking with a business jargon, all of that, in my opinion, doesn't matter and
Right.
makes work less human. I mean, you could imagine like you thinking of the suit as a concept, like it's a uniform. They all look the same, right? You can sort of accessorize, for men or for women, for with a different tie, but ultimately it's a conformity propeller in a business. Um, Same with like deck templates that all sort of look and sound the same. My my feeling, also my experience is that the feeling of needing to fit into those boxes is what saps the humanity out of work
Right.
and makes people feel like not only do they have to put on the blazer, they also have to put on this sort of business mask. And you can feel it too, like at the end of a day when you've been really professional and said all the right things, and then all of a sudden you get to call your friend or significant other, and then you can finally be like, "Oh my god, can I please tell you about my day?"
Yeah, I was on all day, or like there is a performative
Right.
aspect to it. Yes, yes,
Exactly. And it doesn't contribute to the success of the business. I mean, I understand why we do it. We do it to sort of telegraph our competence, or there's sort of like shortcuts for if I look this way, you're going to think that I'm smart in this way or
yeah.
effective.
Optics matter. They do matter.
Right. And so I get that. And we don't live in an unbiased world. And I understand that we have to, like, live in the world while we're trying to change it, but also I'm trying to change it.
Right.
And I
And I mean, we see, speaking of, like the guy wearing the suit. Let's use that as an example with the quirky socks, right?
Right.
And
He's trying.
he's trying, um, and that whenever you see that, they're not focusing on the suit. Like if you're watching a film or a TV show, or you're in, and I've been to many conferences, I'm sure you have as well, where they're wearing socks that are like designed to draw your eye, and you're like, oh, you're not looking at the suit anymore. But
Mhm.
to me, when I see that, I'm not going, well, because you're wearing these socks, I think less of you, right?
Right.
But you're right. It's such a weird thing because I I know in my field of time management and personal productivity, there's a lot of people that wear full collared shirts and ties and suit because it's like, well, time and productivity, it's very professional, it's very this. But we're this state of productiveness that we're in permeates beyond work. And also,
Mhm.
you have to be comfortable too. And I think
Yeah.
that goes back to, so yeah, let's dive into the comfort factor of that as well, because the form and function help create comfort as opposed to performative, where naturally, I mean, what's one of the things that if not the most feared thing is public speaking, right? Even more so than death. So it's like performative. You can tell, like once you've been around long enough, you can tell, okay, well, they're on right now. There's this performance that's happening. I find, like, when I went to my book release party, I was wearing my t-shirt, my jeans. I was wearing, the only thing
Mhm.
I had on were my Gary Vaynerchuk Clouds and Dirts shoes that I always wear to speaking gigs.
Awesome.
And it was relaxed. I was still professional. I was signing books. I did a little talk. No one said, man, if this guy was wearing a suit, I'd be all. I sold plenty of books just being who I was,
Mhm.
because the value is not in the performance. The value is in the quality of the output, the yield, right?
Yes. Yeah. There's there is nothing about loafers that makes you smarter. Like, literally nothing. It's just like, you should wear the shoes you like. I'm a believer you should dress for 3 things. You should dress for joy, whatever makes you happy to have on, for comfort, you could move your body however you want to and not feel constrained, and function. Like, surgeons wear scrubs because they're sanitary, like, great. You don't see a surgeon in, like, a three-piece suit so that you think they're smarter, like, they wear the outfit that's sanitary and comfortable, and their brains work perfectly well in them, and over time, we've come to associate, like, "Oh, a doctor in scrubs, that's fine, I still believe that they're smart." And so, what I'm hoping to do for, like, the professional world is to start to normalize showing up with wet hair to meetings or, our COVID era pajama pants on a Zoom call. If the reason that we don't do that more often is because human nature, we don't wanna be the one person that looks weird in a room. But which is why I really applaud that, our figurative guy with the fancy not fancy, funny socks, the
Yep.
with the because it's one little sort of subversive act that says, "I don't have to fit in the way you want me to fit in." And, in fact, our eyes are drawn to that because that's an expression of that person's personality and humanity, and that's what people are attracted to. Like,
Uh-huh.
I'd much rather know, like, why flamingos on your socks? Like, do you like
Mhm.
flamingos? Were you there? So where did you get them? Did someone buy them for you? Like, that's compelling. It's what also creates camaraderie and friendships at work. You know, I it's an expression of ourselves as humans at work, which is something that we frequently forget we are,
Right,
like.
right. As we're talking about this, the uniform aspect, I went to Catholic high school. We had a uniform.
Mhm.
Everyone had to wear the same, like, there was some variety, but, there was also not a lot of it. And what we would do is we would look at what the rules were, and we would wear what we had to, but we could wear funny socks. The shoes, there were no such thing as uniform shoes. So we got
Ooh.
to wear whatever shoes we wanted. This was the era of the original Beverly Hills 90210. So underneath our
Mhm.
bright, our Oxford long sleeve shirts, we would wear like a bright pink, pastel shirt, or we would wear things that would emote our personality, to your point,
Amazing.
because it's that human aspect. The reason that those existed in that construct was, number one, I mean, again, uniformity kind of matters in that environment, but also it was socioeconomic as well, right? Like, you didn't want, especially
Mm.
when you're teenagers, you don't want to say, oh, these kids can't afford these clothes and these kids can, because, that kind of thing. Because, again, you pointed out the biases. What I want to dive into before we wrap up is the idea of work-life balance, because
Yep.
whenever it says today was fun, a book about work, it's not just a book about work. Like, it is,
No,
but it isn't, right?
that's
So
right.
I I want to hear what your thoughts are on the idea of work-life balance, because I mean, you've kind of alluded to it a little bit as you've through some of the things we've talked about, but it is a hot topic, has been for a long time, and I think it is ripe for change.
Yes. It's like the song, "Are you having any fun? What you getting out of living?" Um, I love the Tony Bennett version. If we are only alive to create economic output, what are we doing? If we're not having any fun, what are we doing with our I mean, of course, we all need, like, a living wage and income, yes. But there needs to be more to life than work. I'm a big proponent that obviously, I wrote the book that says that work should be fun. I
Mhm.
believe our Monday to Friday or your schedule should be time well spent and should give you joy. And yet I think it should only be one of many joys in our lives. And it feels weird that that's even controversial to say
Right.
because it is, because we're so used to identifying so deeply with our work, going above and beyond to get that exceeds employee, performance review, that we sometimes forget that it's our job to defend the rest of our lives, the most beautiful parts of our lives, I would argue, from overworking. And I understand, like, I like working. I've overworked a lot in my life. And I actually don't think there's anything wrong with overworking in and of itself. Like, you feel
Mhm.
passionate about your work, you want to do a good job, you're like really into it, and that's great. The the problem is all in the opportunity cost. If you want to work and you're joyful working that much, great, but what are you giving up in order to do that? And usually those things that get sacrificed first are time with friends and family, our sleep, our health, including it takes time to exercise, to go to your doctor's appointments, to make a proper healthy meal. And so we have to ask ourselves, what is the price that we are paying in order to overwork? And further, what's the price that others around us are paying who don't have a choice? So for example, my daughter cannot decline the late meeting. If I'm going to spend the evening with her, only I can say, no, I'm sorry, I'm not available at 7 p.m. She can't do that. And so, is it okay with me if my daughter is paying the price? And when I frame it that way, sometimes it's like kicks me into gear a little bit. Like, no.
Yeah.
When I think of like Arden's mom, I want Arden to have a mom who's there and a dad who's there, that my husband and I both prioritize that time. And then further, to not only prioritize that time, but actually enjoy it, invest in it. The last chapter of the book is called Get Good at Life,
Yep.
not just work.
Yep.
Because we're so used to putting all of our energy and ambition into getting the next role, promotion, more money, more prestige, all good things. And yet sometimes we forget that there's tons of space for ambition in our lives outside of work. Like, maybe you want to get really good at sleeping, which
Yep.
is like increasingly important to me. Maybe you want to be like an A+ friend and spend a little bit more time on your relationships. And or maybe you just wanna there's a segment in the book about ultimate lounging, which is a phrase I came up with, just in case the Olympic Committee needs to know how good of a lounger you are. Like, maybe you just wanna be really good at doing nothing for an afternoon, and that's beautiful too, and so I'm trying to correct the idea that we have work, and then whatever other time we have around work, we sort of fill in the gaps with like a hobby here for an hour or call here. In other words, our friends and family are getting work scraps. And I think I understand why it's true. And also, I think the longer we allow that to continue, the more that we'll regret it one day, to think that we did not prioritize our relationships, our health, our enjoyment of life now, um, even within a culture of delayed gratification and I'll sleep when I'm dead. No, like, sleep now. It's important. Please sleep now.
This brought to mind environment as well.
Mm, tell me.
So back to the Costco thing. When I moved, so originally lived near Toronto. So Toronto is
Mhm.
basically like the New York of Canada in
Okay.
terms of pace,
Yep.
speed. Everyone's moving. No one really stops to smell the roses. It's very much Ontario, Southern Ontario in particular, very much a live to work mentality. You work 5 days
Mm.
a week, then you go to the cottage, and then It was hilarious growing up because you'd go to the cottage, you'd get there, you'd have to set things up, you'd have a day to kind of
Right.
just enjoy it. And then you got to pack up, drive home, and then we're back to the grind again. Then I got offered the opportunity to move to where I live now, Vancouver Island, west coast of
Mhm.
Canada, to be a manager. So I wasn't even a manager when I was at the Costco in Burlington, which is where it was near Toronto. And when I moved out here, the mentality was very different. It was more
Mhm.
of a work to live mentality as opposed to a live to work. And there was a very distinct moment that I remember. I mean, I've told this story a little bit before, but we had 3 sick calls when I was working and running the food court, because I also ran the food court, in one day. And one of those 2 people said that they were sick. They didn't sound sick. Another person was completely honest and said, yeah, I'm not coming in today. I'm going to use one of my sick days. It's April and it normally rains here in April, but it's super nice out and I want to go out.
Mm.
And I was like, wait, what?
Yeah.
And there's nothing I could do. They have sick, like they could use them. It's not like,
Mhm.
and so now we're down 3 staff. If you've been to a Costco food court, being down 1 staff is problematic. 3, we're pulling people in, all that. I go to my warehouse manager and I say, I'm upset. I'm frazzled. I'm frustrated. Like, how come no one else, I want to be outside. Why? This is our job. This is what we're supposed to do. And I said, this person, they had the temerity to say, I'm not coming in because it's nice out. And they're using one of their
Mhm.
sick days, but we should be able to do something. And he literally looked around me through the big garage door and goes, well, it is nice out. And at that point in time, I went, oh, so it's me that like, I need to adapt. Like, if my boss, who by the way is the first line of defense against head office, who also thinks differently, but
Yeah.
I'm being present in this moment. I said, okay, so clearly this is the way they operate. I can't fight this. So
Yeah.
the role of environment, I'd love to hear about that, not just in terms of like the job that you're doing, like the workplace, but just the city, the town. Because I mean, again, you've spent time in LA, right?
Yeah.
You've spent
Mhm.
time, very different. I mean, in fact, it's hilarious because a lot of Canadians go, oh, so LA is like New York. Like, it's just, I'm like, no, 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 not at all. Like, they're not the same at all.
Right.
Um, you know, they're very different. There may be still a pacing similarity to a degree, but it's about different things and so on and so forth. People are stuck in cars way longer in LA, all that stuff. But I think there's a environment associated with not just the workspace that can help make today either fun or less fun.
Yeah. It's it's hard to swim upstream in any culture, just as you found out. That's, Um, and right, like I live in and am presently now in downtown Manhattan in Tribeca where I live. I'm in the epicenter of overworking, of um, living to work. And on the one hand, I get it. Like I get the culture. I've lived the culture. It's alluring. It's invigorating. It's part of the beauty of New York, of this like striver, I'm gonna make it, if you can make it here, you can make it anywhere kind of mentality. And so I want to give that sort of culture its due because you have to know your enemy. I guess if an overwork culture is my enemy.
Sure.
Um, and yet I do find in any culture, there are, if you look for them, small pockets of people experimenting with a different way of life. And I think that's true for any culture anywhere. The experimentation might be small, but I think it's still present. So, for example, there's a place in New York I love called Happy Medium, which is an art cafe. You get like happy, like medium, like art.
Yep.
And it's all about being really bad at art and just trying it anyway and going with friends. And you can like collage and I love it because it's so antithetical to everything else that New York stands for, which is extreme efficiency. If you are going to do something, it should serve some aim and it all needs to ladder up into something. Otherwise, you are sort of like leaking fuel from your life. And so the notion of spending time creating bad art when you're not trying to be an artist or make it or sell it, I think is just really beautiful and compelling. And so the more I know, more that I personally look for these little examples of, of the person or organization or community that's sort of swimming upstream to this dominant culture of overwork, the more I can sort of find some community. Um, Also start to feel like this is an this is a possible and totally reasonable way to live. Just like in Vancouver, or like people are they live and they're happy and they have full lives
Yep.
and they go outside in April. And like there's nothing about a slower or more playful kind of life that means everything's going to fall apart, which is what New York sometimes tries to make you feel like. It tries to make you feel like if you're not climbing up the ladder, if you're not making more money, if you're not optimizing everything, you're falling behind.
Yeah, the city will collapse, you will fall, you can't survive,
Right.
basically.
And it's
Yeah.
just not true. But it's helpful to find those little pockets of other people or other communities that can reinforce for you, like, yeah, it's not true. I thought it wasn't true. I thought that if I took off this day from work because it's nice outside, like, turns out my company won't collapse, even if I'm the CEO. And if it does, that you haven't set your company up well.
It's such a crazy dynamic when you think about like a city like New York. I was told you before you record, like so many museums, so many places to see and
Yeah.
visit requires space, time, slowing down. And yet you walk outside of it and it's the exact opposite. The environment. And so it's almost paradoxical the way that it's like, okay, we have all these things that you should go take time to see and envelop yourself in, but don't take too long.
Right.
Or we are completionist mentality. You have to see them all, right? And there's that too, which is we all these obstacles that we keep either finding or forging, right? And I think that
Mhm.
that's something that we can do, but also, I mean, environment can do as well. I want to dovetail into the last question because I know that almost every one of my journal entries ends with how I felt about today. Sometimes it says today was
Mm.
fun, today was great. How valuable, two-part question, how valuable is journaling to this process, to what you're sharing in the book? Because you've got exercises and a bunch of different variety of things in here. It's a very fun book, practical, but also kind of it makes you think, right? But so number one, the role of journaling in this, and do you journal yourself as well?
Uh, no, I don't I don't journal myself. I write on Substack. I wrote the book.
Which is a
So
form of it's a form of journaling.
yeah.
It's just you're writing, but maybe not necessarily sharing, like this person treated me like garbage today, or my my daughter was a bit of a pain, or my daughter was not a bit. I mean, my journal, like I've said before, uh, I'll be dead when someone reads it, and then it won't matter.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's an amazing practice because it allows time for reflection, right? Like that's the point of it. The fact that I don't do it, I don't know why. I've tried to create a practice. It just doesn't. I feel like I can just think these thoughts in my head. Why am I writing them down? Like so, but, sometimes for people it's helpful to write them down. Um, but to your question about like reflecting on like how was the day? Was today fun? I I love the title of the book because it's just the most, like, simple, almost atomic way to understand the quality of your life, which per that Annie Dillard quote, the how we spend our days is how we spend our lives. And so if you are saying most days, "Today was fun," then, you're winning. You're doing something right. And not every day, of course, some days are not gonna be fun, but if most days you're saying that, then something is going really well. So actually what we did, I'm making a small number of these little book kits that,
Hmm.
um, I'm also gonna raffle off. So if anyone wants to come to my website or LinkedIn, you'll see a raffle coming. But in that little book kit, we're including a library card. So you know those old-fashioned
Oh, yeah.
ones that, like, right, if you're of a certain age, you'll remember, you take out the paper card and the librarian stamps it with the date. And so on that little card inside the book is the question, like, "Today was fun?" Question mark. So there's a space to write the date. You have, like, a little spectrum to write, make an X, "Yes, it was fun," "No, it wasn't fun," or somewhere in the middle, and the opportunity to write one moment of joy. So even if it was a terrible day, I'm convinced you can find one 30-second moment of pleasure or joy, even if it was just like I bit into an apple, tasted really good. If that's all you got on a day, like, okay, that's
Hmm.
fine. And so as a sort of, I don't know, a micro journaling habit, I'm hoping to encourage people to reflect on the day in this way, to say, was today fun? No shame or judgment. Yes, no, somewhere in the middle. And what was one beautiful part of it? Because any day that we spend is a day that's not coming back. We spent it, like it's gone. And so if we can at least find one part that was special to us, that was meaningful, that brought a little joy to us or to someone else, then I think then I think we won.
The book is called Today Was Fun, a book about work. Seriously. Bree, thank you so much for taking the time to have a fun and productive conversation with me today. Where can people pick up the book and keep up with the work that you're doing?
Yes, the book is wherever books are sold. So all of the bookshop, Amazon, local retailers. If it's not in your local retailer, your local bookshop, say, "Can you please order? Today was fun," and they'll be able to get it for you. More information on my website, breegroff.com. You can also subscribe to my Substack, and I hope you'll enjoy reading it.
Thanks again for joining me for a productive conversation.
Thank you, Mike.
Thanks to Bree for joining me on the program. You can check out all of the related show notes, links, everything at mikevardy.com/podcast 614 or wherever you're listening to this podcast right now, be it Spotify, Apple Podcasts, even YouTube. And by the way, wherever you're listening to this podcast, if you're not already subscribed, hit the subscribe button or follow us. Spotify allows for that. So does YouTube. That way, you won't miss a single episode of what's to come. We've got a really cool Ask Mike Anything episode coming up in a couple of weeks. And we've got lots of great episodes booked all the way through till the end of 2025. So if you don't want to miss them, subscribe to the show. That way they just arrive through your podcast platform of choice without you having to do anything. It's the most productive thing you can do. Another thing you can do to help support the show other than subscribing is to rate, review the show, or even leave comments. Spotify allows you to do that. So does YouTube. Just send me feedback, insights, what you think, what you like, what could be improved upon. That way we can make the show better. That's it for this episode. Thanks so much for taking the time to tune in. I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Until then, I'm Mike Vardy, the host of A Productive Conversation, reminding you to stop doing productive and start being productive. See you later.